Hello, Brovs. We're back with Trousered Apes. Sick Literature in a Sick Society by Duncan Williams. Chapter 4 The Reasons Why. Now there are times when a whole generation is caught between two ages, between two modes of life, and thus loses the feeling for itself, for the self evident, for all morals, for being safe and innocent. Hermann Hesse, Steppenwolf, 1929. It is remarkable how the above quotation echoes the sentiments expressed by Matthew Arnold in stanzas from the Grande Chartreuse, composed some 74 years previously. Arnold, mourning the fact that rigorous teachers seized his youth and purged its faith and trimmed its fire, describes his generation of intellectuals as wandering between two worlds, one dead, the other powerless to be born, and expresses the hope that years hence perhaps may dawn an age more fortunate, alas, than we, which without hardness will be sage, and gay without frivolity, sons of the world. Oh, speed those years! But while we wait, allow our tears. The loss to which Arnold is referring arose from his growing inability to believe in an ordering, controlling cosmic intelligence, or in other words, a God. This failure of belief, for which Arnold attempted to substitute culture, believing that only in this way could anarchy be avoided, was confined in his day to a small if growing minority. Today it has become as fixed and dominant in Western thought as were belief and faith in previous ages. This statement may be challenged by impressive statistics regarding church attendance, but church-going and genuine faith in a personal and supernatural God bear little relationship to one another. A few years ago, I discussed John Robinson's Honest to God with a group of students at a church-related college. They were intelligent, articulate, if somewhat earnest, young people, but when we came to the passage in which Robinson alludes to Julian Huxley's sense of spiritual relief on rejecting the idea of God as a supernatural being, I found that the students did not need to reject any such belief. They had never had it, what had taken Robinson and others of his generation years of heart-searching and mental anguish to achieve, they had effortlessly assumed and had been waiting for him or someone else to articulate their position. All of them were regular churchgoers and no doubt participated in the singing of such hymns as Addison's The Spacious Firmament on High, with its concluding line, "The hand that made us is divine," without realizing the essential incongruity of their attitude. Theological controversy is not the chief purpose of the present study, but two important points deserve attention. Firstly, Arnold's sense of loss appears to have become a gain for Huxley. Secondly, no real understanding of modern literature or society is possible without recognizing that for the vast majority of modern writers, artists, critics, and other molders of public taste and beliefs, God, in the old sense of the world, is not dead but never existed. Furthermore, anyone who professes such a belief in a supernatural force is, in their opinion, either an escapist, that is to say, a moral coward, or else lacks the intellectual apparatus to give his opinion weight. In consequence, a form of intellectual totalitarianism has been established within which charm circle everything is condoned and no limits are imposed upon its members' actions or beliefs. Any attempt to impose such restrictions would be greeted with cries of censorship or fascism, yet curiously enough, they themselves constitute a new Herrenvolk or master race. One has only to substitute the terms Western culture or the past for non-Aryan in Nazi writings, and the comparison will not seem so extravagant. Lest some readers may feel that I exaggerate the hostility of the moderns to traditional culture and values, the following passage from The Dehumanization of Art, 1925, by Ortega, I'm not sure how you say the Y, a Gasset, may lend support for my statement. For about 20 years now, the most alert young people of two successive generations in Berlin, Paris, London, New York, Rome, Madrid have found themselves faced with the undeniable fact that they have no use for traditional art. Moreover, that they detest it. He goes on to observe that hatred of art is unlikely to be an isolated phenomenon. It goes hand in hand with hatred of science, hatred of state, hatred in some of civilization as a whole. One may recall that this total rejection of tradition and of traditional morality and religion signified, in Spengler's opinion, the death throes of a culture and of civilization. Only with an understanding of the almost total secularization of Western society during the past century do such modern philosophical, religious, and literary phenomena as existentialism, and we'll go to the footnote. I am not referring here to such religious existentialists as Gabriel Marcel, Martin Buber, Karl Jaspers, and Paul Tillich, but rather to that type of existentialism typified by Jean-Paul Sartre. The latter has enjoyed, for fairly obvious reasons, a much greater popularity in literary circles than have the former. Moreover, since Camus' opinions differ markedly from those of Sartre, he once declared that he did not have much liking for the two famous existential philosophy. His whole philosophy will be treated in a subsequent chapter 7. And literary phenomena as existentialism, situational ethics, and the theater of the absurd become intelligible. They are all differing ways, manifestations of a failure to believe in a supreme being, and therefore in a regulated, ordered universe. The abandonment of the old moral sanctions and a search for self-fulfillment is yet another result of this loss of faith. As I.A. Richards has observed, when a created, simple, and eternal soul was the pivotal point, good was conformity with the will of the Creator, evil was rebellion. When the associationist psychologist substituted the swarm of sensations and images for the soul, good becomes pleasure and evil becomes pain. He adds that what differentiates good from evil is that one represents fullness and the other narrowness. Of additional importance is the fact that with the loss of faith, more and more writers and artists are repudiating, either overtly or tacitly, the belief in man's spirituality and are concentrating exclusively upon his animalistic qualities. Tennyson was one of the last of the major writers to exhibit an affirmative belief in man's destiny. In the conclusion of In Memoriam, he bids man arise and fly, the reeling fawn, the sensual feast, move upward, working out the beast, and let the ape and tiger die. Nowadays, such hope seems absent. Contemporary writers dwell upon the sensual feast and appear ignorant, for the most part, or even the possibility of an alternative. I have said that such modern phenomena as existentialism, situational ethics, and the theater of the absurd are only intelligible in the context of this loss of faith in an external and eternal God. In other words, they subsist on the belief that life is all we have. In order to elaborate upon this statement, I propose to examine each of these phenomena separately as a manifestation of our godless society. And I think one thing that Williams is his name Williams? Yeah, Duncan Williams is forgetting is that writers do not exist within a vacuum. I mean, anybody can write, but to be accepted into book form, you have to go through editors and publishers and all that. So, I mean, it's not so much the writers, because I'm sure if he wanted to, you could find any writer to support any sort of philosophy, but it just seems that the moderns are all going towards this escapism sort of mindset. And of course, that's what people want to read, so that's what they give. Plus, there's a bit of indoctrination and that sort of thing. Anyways, the existentialist, and again, I am not referring here to religious existentialism, regards the earth and the entire universe as random, accidental, and therefore meaningless phenomena devoid of any significance or morality. Man does, however, retain a measure of choice. When confronted by this cosmic inanity, he can decide either to lead an enthusiastic and honorable existence, the phrase is William Barrett's, or he can lapse into despair. The atheistic basis for such philosophy is too obvious to need elaboration, but certain questions remain unanswered. First of all, surrounded by such overwhelming chaos on all sides, why bother to make a choice, particularly since in the final analysis of such decisions are meaningless and therefore obviously void? Sartre himself appears to have reached this spiritual nadir, I believe it is, when he declares in Saint Genet that we are, in any event, impossible nullities. Tennyson has a more realistic reaction to the problem when, after contemplating the possibility of such a meaningless, soulless universe, he declares, "'Twere hardly worth my while to choose of things all mortal, or to use a little patience ere I die. 'Twere best at once to sink to peace like birds the charming serpent draws, to drop head foremost in the jaws of vacant darkness, and to cease in memoriam." The fact that Sartre and his followers do not pursue Tennyson's course suggests that either they have not faced up to the full implications of their beliefs, or more properly, disbeliefs, or alternatively, they have discovered some palliative, such as communism, in the furtherance of which they can escape from the knowledge of the futility of absolutely everything, including, of course, the futility of whichever fashionable escapist activity is currently engrossing their attention. Such a philosophy may sustain itself for a time, living on its own dynamism, but eventually the persistent questioning why will arise, and with no adequate answer, the edifice must crumble. It never does. Secular activists resemble players in a football game in which there are no rules, no referee, no time limit, and no spectators. For a time, a certain physical exuberance will keep the participants occupied, but as their energy becomes sapped, so the purposelessness of the whole game will permeate their consciousness, and one by one they will retire, leaving only the totally unintelligent and insensitive to continue the endless farce. As Teilhard de Chardin has written in The Phenomenon of Man, even on stacks of material energy, even under the spur of immediate fear or desire, without the taste for life, mankind would soon stop inventing and constructing for a work it knew to be doomed in advance. If progress is a myth, that is to say, if faced by the work involved, we can say, what's the good of it all? Our efforts will flag. Secondly, when faced with a cosmic inanity which reduces man to an impossible nullity, why attempt to reduce such chaos to a system? Why not lie back and scream or indulge in any other maniacal act which has presumably as much or as little significance as philosophical speculation or any other rational activity? Why write plays and short stories? Why not abandon oneself to suicide or an avowed conscious hedonism? To attempt anything else while holding such views is simply compounding absurdity. We cannot have it both ways. Either there is a controlling force lending meaning and significance to the universe and to individual and collective human life, or else, to quote Tennyson again, the earth is darkness at the core and dust and ashes, all that is. In this light, Huxley's sense of spiritual relief, which comes from rejecting the idea of God as a supernatural being, appears to be totally unintelligible, whereas Arnold's anguish would seem to stem from a more honest confrontation with the awesome and overwhelming implications of such a view. It appears that in spite of their avowed attitude, most existentialists do indicate a preference for certain modes of conduct as opposed to others, do recognize certain actions as being inherently good while others are bad, and so on. If pressed for an explanation, they fall back upon instinct or quote Kierkegaard's remark that the conclusions of passion are the only reliable ones. But whence the instinct, and why in a random chaotic universe should there be any conclusions arising from passion, and why should they be reliable? One cannot but feel that, if further pressed, they would be forced to fall back on a position not dissimilar to that which Pope expresses in the Essay on Man. This light and darkness in our chaos joined, what shall divide the God within the mind? Next, let us consider situational ethics as another manifestation of the contemporary failure to accept a supernatural deity or divine order. Julian Huxley concedes that every society in every age needs some system of beliefs, including a basic attitude to life, an organized set of ideas around which emotion and purpose may gather, and a conception of human destiny. It needs a philosophy and a faith to achieve a guide to orderly living. In other words, a morality. Situational ethics is an attempt to provide a basis for personal morality, which may vary according to the situation in which the individual finds himself at a given moment, as opposed to the old legalistic code which held to certain inexorable, unchanging laws of conduct. Thus, situational ethicists are relativistic. In the words of their most recent spokesman, Joseph Fletcher, they deny that there are any unwritten, immutable laws of heaven, agreeing with Rudolf Boltzmann that all such notions are idolatrous and a demonic pretension. As Fletcher points out in Situation Ethics, Judaism, Catholicism, and Protestantism, all major Western religious traditions, have been legalistic. In other words, situational ethics as a system is yet another attack on traditional morality. Fletcher himself obviously recognizes the danger of lapsing into antinomianism or amorality. To be relative, of course, means to be relative to something. To be absolutely relative is to be inchoate, random, unpredictable, unjudgeable, meaningless, amoral. There must be an absolute of norms of some kind if there is to be any true relativity. Let us examine now a typical example cited by Fletcher of situational ethics applied to a concrete case. While trekking west along the Boone Trail in Kentucky in the 18th century, two families are separated from the wagon train. A woman has an ailing child who is endangering her and her other three children by its constant cries. Nevertheless, she clings to the child, whose noise eventually betrays their presence to some Indians who capture and kill them. Another woman, recognizing that her crying baby is endangering the trial party, kills it with her bare hands, and they are able to reach their destination in safety. Which woman, Fletcher asks, made the correct decision? I suspect that the vast majority of readers would agree with Fletcher that the second woman showed courage and sagacity. True, she broke one of the 10 commandments, but relative to her situation, who can doubt that she acted in an understandable manner? Few would realize that in taking this position, they are in fact denying the existence of anything beyond this life, that they are emphasizing the here and now and repudiating the possibility of a hereafter, that they are placing the fallible, finite human mind in the position of an infinite, eternal one. Wait, so is this guy saying that the woman who killed her kids, the moral one, after he's saying that? No, this is Fletcher. All right. The exponents of such a system do not appear to see that if you take away the idealistic foundation on which religion has been built, that is to say, an external, personal, supernatural, spiritual being, the whole edifice collapses. Where is the source of the absolute or norm without which all is inchoate, random, unpredictable, unjudgeable, meaningless? The problem for them is essentially the same as it is for the existentialist. How does one create any sense out of chaos? Why bother to try? Fletcher takes issue predictably with Cicero's statement in De Legibus to the effect that only a madman could maintain that the distinction between the honorable and dishonorable, between virtue and vice, is a matter of opinion, not of nature. But this, says Fletcher, is exactly what situational ethics maintain. In other words, every man can establish his own private system of morality. Sartre can canonize Genet, a self-confessed pervert and thief. Mailer can encourage people to develop the psychopath in themselves. Non-art can be made into art, and so forth. A belief in God as ultimate reference results in an assumption that there exist ultimate moral, aesthetic, and legal standards. Conversely, a lack of such belief eventually creates a society in which every individual becomes his own moralist, aesthete, I can't say it, aesthete, aesthete, as I don't know how to say it, and lawmaker. The outcome of such supra-individualism is social and artistic anarchy, a state into which Western society and possibly mankind as a whole appears to be rushing. And footnote 1, an article, Ezra Pound and the Great Style by Hayden Carruth, Saturday, Review 9 April 1966, made the point forcefully. What meaning, he asks, has Homer or Ezra Pound in the age of inverting values? How shall our children live in a world from which the spirit, then history, and finally nature have fled, leaving only the mindless mechanics of process and chance? Will any place exist for a humane art in a society from which the last trace of reverence, any reverence, has been rubbed out? And with that grand question of whatever it was, we shall stop this chapter and resume next time, bruv. Goodbye. Goodbye.